higher consciousness that we're seeking is beneath our feet. The earth is our higher consciousness. Again, we've been trained to think that consciousness is outside of us. Consciousness is somewhere up there. And, it's like, I'm not going to get, like conspiracy theory, but it does feel like it's a kind of a conscious effort to pull us away from the truth. Guess what? Consciousness is in your body, in your bones, right? So we've reclaimed that piece. And then to go even further, our body is our earth. So our consciousness is the wideness. It's the depth and the breadth of this whole planet is our consciousness. If we can suspend our disbelief and wander around in that, experiment with it enough to come to one's own recognition of, that's reality. We ridicule, humiliate, or shame anyone that claims to have a connection with an other than human. And we have internalized that, and we do it to ourselves. It's not woo-woo, although it will be assigned woo-woo. What's woo-woo is thinking that human beings are somehow separate from and superior to and can dominate the rest of nature.
Welcome to the Enchanted Earth Podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. These sacred stories are begging to be shared now. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own.
So did you know that this podcast is inspired by my book, The Enchanted Earth? It's available wherever online books are sold, and you can get a copy at the link below in the show notes. So today, let's start our conversation with Julie Brams. Julie is an earth-centered psychotherapist, meditation practitioner, and author of The Embedded Mind, a groundbreaking new book at the intersection of psychology, ecology, and social justice. Drawing on clinical practice, evidence-based methodology, that's interesting, evidence-based methodology, and scientific research, Julie Brams shows how healing our disconnection from our earth is the next frontier of psychology. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, well, I have to tell you that, on occasion I do have authors come on and we talk a little bit about their book and then get into other things. So I got a copy of your book. And usually, I'll go through, I'll read a chapter, I'll breeze through it, just kind of get the gist of it, maybe come up with some questions. And when I started reading it, I went, oh no, I got to read this whole thing. And I just really, really enjoyed it. I think first and foremost, what I really do love is the firsthand experience of what it was like for you to kind of walk through that portal of recognizing that you needed something deeper in your life, and then experiencing the forest therapy guides training that you did. And I just was hooked. I just loved reading like every day what came up for you, what you experienced. I mean, I love that. That's just who I am. That's why I do this podcast, right? I love the stories.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your feedback. That means a lot because it's a love child. So, yeah. And I wanted to really add those things in. I'm glad that it landed that way, but I really did want to demystify this and just make it so user friendly that no one would ever, or at least I hope, no one would read it and think, I can't do that. I really hope that it is inspirational in terms of you have already done it when you were a child. This is just about allowing your adult self to remember and maybe go further than our culture allows us at this point to re-embed ourselves back into our earth.
I love the term you used, reEarthing, because I've been using the term renaturing, and it's the same thing. It's about re-engaging. I think you mentioned before we started the recording, reclaiming our authentic selves in relationship to Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also, and I mentioned it in the book, but using language in a way that can help people out of this mental problem. I mean, it sounds silly, but this psychological trap that we're in because our language is part of what keeps us separated. So I did come up with that little word, reEarthing, with a small R-E, capital E, earthing, again, to point to the fact that we cannot be separate from Earth. Biologically, we are connected. It's just a psychological, it's a conceptual mistake. And again, I don't mean to say that anyone's doing anything wrong. This is something that was imposed upon us back in history, where we can see exactly what happened to our indigeneity as we were, pretty violently severed from our Earth connection. But our bodies can't be. Our bodies cannot be. So this idea of reEarthing in the way that I'm using it, or I've also come up with this rerooting, they think of like rerooting our mind back into a consciousness that's, again, embedded and embodied with Earth as its basic kin. Like, this is where I hope the field of psychology will take this on as a real mental health issue, that we need to come back into sanity, come back into reality, come back into relationship with the other than human world as kin, very similar to the way that our indigenous contemporaries already do and have held on to, thank God, have held on to these ways of being connected in friendship, at least, if not family.
And that was one of the things I wanted to bring up, was the language around our experience of nature. Can you just give us an example of how we might kind of be blocking our connection through language?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples. One is just simply, and if the listeners want to do this as well, just sort of look into your own mind in the ways that you almost subtly disconnect, keep yourself separate from. When we say even like humans and nature, or going out into nature, we're already describing it in a way that is disconnected from us, as if we're not nature. So it's giving us some kind of idea. Again, it's a little gaslighty, this idea that we're not organisms that were birthed from the earth like everything else. So one of the changes that I've learned is to talk about the rest of nature. So if we start to change even that little phrase, I'm going to go out and be with the rest of nature, I'm nature meeting nature, that starts to break that conceptual barrier, right? And realign us more realistically with the actual physical biological connection. I'll give you another example. This is something that came up when I was talking to someone else about, how we're trained away from relating with the rest of nature in such a beautiful, natural way as children. I was talking to someone the way that a child might take a piece of dirt and put it in their mouth. And, maybe even rightly so, we might say, we don't want them to do that. But usually it's something like, don't put that in your mouth. That. Very cold, objectifying, like it's dead. Don't put that. Don't put it in your mouth. And I was saying, maybe we don't want them to put soil in their mouth. Maybe we do. But if we could relanguage it in such a way as, this is grandmother and don't eat her. You can kiss her. You can smell her, but don't eat her. Sort of allowing this natural kinship again that all of us as children had, to continue on into our adulthood. And again, as you said, reclaiming our birthright, reclaiming our better way of being here. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That is just, it's like you said, it's so inbred in us, the language. And it has a big impact. We don't think it does, but subconsciously we are in separation.
Right. And that's part of, the let's say the remedy in this kind of earth-centered psychology is to really look at all of those mental aspects and learn a different language, or create a different language together, because it's so accepted, we don't notice it until we do. And then when we notice it, it's like, whew, and every time at least for me, every time I've unlocked one of these cage door, I feel better, just flat out better.
Yeah. Now, so you were a trained psychologist, and at some point you kind of opened up to or learned about eco-psychology. How did that occur? And was there a specific teacher or book, or how did that happen?
Yeah. Right. So I was clinically trained in psychology as a marriage and family therapist is what my licensure is, which I think is also a nice addition, because we're talking then about expanding this definition of family to include the other than human members. So feels like a good, an easy kind of, progress forward. I've said I came into the field already with a deep connection to the earth and love the earth so much that I wanted to help people, not because I just love people, but I would love to help people feel better and therefore treat each other better and treat the earth better. So it's, that was always part of what was in my heart as a psychologist or as a psychotherapist. And then, yes, there is a subdivision called eco-psychology. It's not new. And this is another reason why I felt like I wanted to write the book and give some different language to it, because it doesn't seem to have caught fire in the way that I think it should. It's still sort of like a niche, which I don't understand that. To me, that should be the foundation of all psychology, not a separated out kind of a, oh, you do that, no, I think we all need to finally do that as the foundation of well-being.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of kind of the thinking around consciousness is like mathematics is trying to understand consciousness through math. And now mathematicians are going, oh, reason why we can't is because consciousness is the foundation of mathematics and the foundation of everything. So that is so true. Eco-psychology is the foundation of who we are as human beings, as part of this planet.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the word consciousness, because I think that is even more dear to my heart as a curious girl coming into the world, very fascinated with what is the truth and what's the deal with human consciousness. And so just today I had this sentence sort of arise, that higher consciousness that we're seeking is beneath our feet. The earth is our higher consciousness. Again, we've been trained to think that consciousness is outside of us. Consciousness is somewhere up there. And, it's like, I'm not going to get, like conspiracy theory, but it does feel like it's a kind of a conscious effort to pull us away from the truth. Consciousness is somewhere up there or higher, rather than, no, guess what? Consciousness is in your body, in your bones, right? And we do know that now. We're able to admit that our mind and body are one thing, so we've reclaimed that piece. And then to go even further, our body is our earth. So our consciousness is the wideness. We don't have to necessarily say higher because of positionality, but it's the depth and the breadth of this whole planet is our consciousness. If we can suspend our disbelief and wander around in that, experiment with it enough to come to one's own recognition of, yeah, that's reality, that's true. And then again, I think I said it in the book too, like if you really want to look, that the earth is also connected to all the other planets and the Milky Way and the galaxies, and like it's a little bit overwhelming for a human mind, but that is our consciousness, and it begins below our feet in our earth. Yeah.
And how many of us were raised to think that below was bad.
Yeah.
And above was God.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to, just a couple more things, and then I want to get into a story or two. Something that you brought up in the book was that the idea that nature suffers the loss of us.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I had an experience with a dialogue with a tree when I was writing this book, The Enchanted Earth, that was essentially the message that I received. And when I read it in your book, I went, oh yeah, oh yeah, this is so true. Can you just kind of share what you meant by that with the audience?
Yeah. Because what we're reclaiming is a relationship. It's understanding sentience and intelligence in other species that allows for relationship. If we are walking around ignoring them, ignoring these other beings that do nothing but keep us alive, especially plants and trees, right? That's what they do all day, is make sure that we're all alive. If we walk by and we don't connect again, I'm using these words, but like a familial way or again, friendly way, it only makes sense to me that they know it, they notice us, they know we're there. Of course they know we're there. In the ways that they receive, what's the word? Like we emanate heat, water, like we're sweating, we also have pheromones we're emitting. They know that we're there. Okay, of course, we know, like a squirrel, we can all agree. The squirrel sees you and it'll either run or it'll go after you.
Oh, they got some food for me.
Right. I actually had a squirrel in the park one day throw a half-eaten acorn at me because I was putting the pine needles up to my face with my daughter when she was little, like a cat. And I was going, meow, meow. And this acorn comes at me. And I was like, whoa. And it was just like, clearly did not like that.
That is such a great story. Oh my
I know. So anyway, we can know that some of them are aware of us. And then many others we think aren't. But of course, we know scientifically, because we need that seal of approval from science, that trees in particular, as an example, as soon as we're around them, they start to read our immune system. They start to send out phytoncides and things that boost our immune system back up to where it needs to be. So we're actually living our lives indoors and online in a deficit. And then when we're spending time hanging out with a tree, all of our natural killer cells, everything goes back up to the baseline where it should be. I mean, there's a lot to say about the way that they hear us, feel us, see us, and send help immediately to us. So I thought a lot about, like, what's the thing that humans do? And it's hard because we can be such bad neighbors. But I think in our best self, we love, when we feel good, we love very well. And I thought about that as an actual communication that we can give back to, our other than human family members. And I thought about it. If we're not loving them, of course they miss that. Of course they miss it. And when we do love them, and again, we have plenty of science to prove it. If not your own pet, like one knows that if you are rubbing the belly of your dog, they love it. And if you're gone, they miss you. It's just, again, expanding these things that we allow ourselves to believe to the other than humans, which we've artificially been taught, no, you can't do that. The ocean doesn't miss me when I'm gone. It's like, yeah, it probably does.
The water has memory. More
Right.
than, I mean, water is in everything, but natural bodies of water, they hold that strong memory. And something else that you wrote about, which I thought, yeah, this is really great for people who are new to showing their love of nature and trying to, quote unquote, connect to nature. You talked about doing something like, say, hugging a tree or walking up to a tree and sitting with it or whatever. You talk that awkwardness is a good sign. And I just had a big smile on my face. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think it's really important to understand that feeling awkward, feeling embarrassed, feeling like, am I crazy? These kinds of shame coming up, those are good indications that you're leaving this cognitive cage, you're leaving this perceptual cage, because again, that's how we keep each other in line. We ridicule, humiliate, or shame anyone that claims to have a connection with an other than human. And we have internalized that and we do it to ourselves. And so that's why I'm saying it's a good indicator that you're actually leaving these artificial boundaries and coming back into reality. And I want to keep saying that it's reality. It's not woo woo, although it will be assigned woo woo. What's woo woo is thinking that human beings are somehow separate from and superior to and can dominate the rest of nature. That is a dangerous hypothetical that was implanted in us a while back and reinforced with different spikes along the way in history. But that idea that humans are separate and superior to, that's woo-woo. That is a crazy, crazy delusion. So
yes, I love it. I love it. I say we have two planets, Saturn and Neptune, and they're the opposite. Saturn is the planet of like reality and the physicalness of our world. And Neptune is like the ocean. It's ephemeral. It's here, it's there, it's fog, it's mist. And, we've been taught that Saturn is reality and Neptune is our imagination and wacky. But actually, quantum physics is showing us it's the other way around.
Yes. And this is also, I think, very charming to me. That science, okay, it's taken a while. But science is, of course, showing us what reality is, that everything is sentient, that there is no linear time, that there is no hierarchy, that it's a web of interconnection, this kind of mycelial, network of interbeing that we work. It's also interesting, I put it in the book too, that when we study ecosystems, we never put human beings in, because that's weird. And I mentioned there are two women, and I don't have their names at the top of my head, but that did some research around ecosystems, including humans in, and seeing in some cultures the very positive impact that humans in right relationship have with the rest of nature. Of course, when you follow this Delulu idea that we're separate and can do whatever the heck we want, we see the destruction, and that's what we're at the end of at this point. And I do think our consciousness is waking up because we are connected to Earth. And as she says, enough's enough. We are also coming back like, oh, wait, the trance is being broken. Yeah.
Oh, yes. And it is so wonderful to hear you say that. But yes, we are finally waking up to it out of necessity. It really is at the end of this separation. So wonderful. So, Julie, as I mentioned before, you had some beautiful stories at the end of your book from other forest therapy guides and their experiences. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you on this podcast, because that's what this podcast is all about. Sharing these mystical, sometimes mystical, often mystical, profound, often profound, moving experiences in nature. Does one arise for you to share with us today?
Yeah, there are a few that are popping in. Gosh, it gets pretty complex. So let me try to. A lot of these stories, from the way that I am inhabiting this type of lifestyle, comes through forest therapy, nature therapy, which in many ways is an act of deep listening. And again, suspending disbelief so that you can actually let yourself receive what's around you. So much of my time is spent out of doors and just letting myself observe and become aware of what might be otherwise passed over or gone unnoticed. So I had an experience where I was sitting on a lawn and I was just sort of there and communing, and not doing much, but listening, just being still and listening and allowing, in this kind of full sensory, full body listening. And I had thought to myself, because the stories of the guides, oftentimes they're very mystical. And so I was saying, I want to have a mystical experience, like, how come I don't have a snake come walk up and look at me and then, whatever. So I was sitting there with that sort of longing or jealousy. And I heard a sound. I heard this sort of like scratching sound. So I like opened my eyes and I looked around and saw nothing. So I kind of went back into my meditation, my listening. And then I heard it again. I was like, okay, that's the second time I know I heard something. So I looked again to my right where I thought it was coming from. I saw nothing. Again, I go back to listening. Third time, this scritch, 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 So I look again and suddenly I see the grass beside me is like moving, just kind of bumping up and down. So I was just looking, and up from under the ground comes a gopher. Just popping its head up and looking and doing what gophers do, but it was like right next to me. And so I just sat with it. And, I mean, is that like, I was joking to my mentor. I was like, but I only got a gopher. But, I mean, I'm kidding. But it's like, that's a pretty amazing thing to have this creature come up through the ground right next to me. We're just kind of sitting side by side. And that to me is one of these moments. It's not the kind of mystical I think that people maybe want. It's not dramatic. It's very simple, but it's very profound and it's very special. So I'll tell that story.
Oh, thank you for saying that, because like you said, most of us really want that really like whoa experience. But nature is so subtle, and you can easily miss, like you could have easily missed that gopher, that opportunity. I mean, you communed, you looked at each other. I mean, you are there together on this planet. I mean, it is precious. And that is like amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many people have experiences. I mean, when I started writing the book, I said, everybody has to have these stories. And then I started asking, and they're like, what you're talking about, what do you mean profound experience in nature or mystical, and some people, though, when I would share some of the stories, be like, oh, something like that happened to me. Or it brought up another story that was buried.
Right.
And that, I think, is the magic of sharing these stories.
Right.
And that is why I wrote the book. But even more so, that is why I created this podcast, because if any listeners hear any glimpse, get a little awakening in their head of a story, it just brings them right back into that moment.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% that it's a way of sharing our experiences and being seen in those experiences. It's also a medicine out of this shaming, which is part of the forest therapy I've been trained in. Each invitation is shared in like a wisdom circle kind of a way, and it is in part a way for people to feel more encouragement, feel more validation of this is real. Because if you're out in an area and we come back into the circle and 3 people out of the group said, I heard the rock say this, and all 3 go, I did too, that starts to build our lay person evidence, not the scientific research, but it's this cultural affirmation of, well, yes, if we all had that experience and we all got that same message, it's harder to disbelieve it. So
I thought you were going another way with that, so I apologize. I see what you're saying, and I'm wondering, though, 3 people give a mystical experience, and then you've got others that go, "Oh, I just saw a gopher," and they feel like, yeah, I didn't, nothing really magical happened because they're hearing other people share something like really wild. But I know when you said in your book how you are trained, and it was like beautiful how ANFT, who you were trained with, share how you as a guide are, like you said, kind of like neutral. Like nobody's story is like, oh my gosh, it's neutral. It's sharing, passing the stick for the next one to share. And it's just a circle to share.
Right. And I think too, like, I'm really glad that you're bringing that up, because one of the other ways that we're separated out from nature is by thinking in hierarchy, rather than, I always refer back to Gloria Steinem, that we're linked, not ranked. But in that example that you gave, which I have experienced myself, where it's like, oh, their experience was better than mine, there's that ranking system. So that's not even a problem. That's going to happen. But it's, again, how we, or how I as a guide, or how we as a culture begin to care for when someone is trapped in their idea of better than, worse than, superior, inferior. Like, oh, that's a more magical, mystical experience and mine wasn't. That we have a tender heart around that is also part of breaking out of this cage, is to really understand all experiences are equal. This idea of equanimity, although I will say, I learned through a Dharma talk with Thich Nhat Hanh that they were saying, the illusion of superiority, the illusion of inferiority, and the illusion of equality, because equality itself needs a ranking order to exist. Yeah. So it's really learning to relax all of that and recognize the wisdom in each experience, the medicine, if you will, in the gopher, or the rock that says something, or the song that a tree gives you. Like, some of them can be very outside of our normal experience, and some of them are very inside our normal experience, but they're all together forming this tincture of ingredients that, let's say, everyone needs to hear all of it. Everyone even needs to hear, I got nothing. That is an experience. That is wisdom. I didn't hear a thing. I didn't feel a thing. I think I put in the book my first experience with this kind of nature therapy. It's like, go find a tree and spend 20 minutes with it. And all I was just like, why are there so many ants? And what is this? And it's not that I didn't like the tree, but I was like, I don't get this. I don't know what this is. And that's wisdom. There's no judgment against where one is in their relationship, other than to notice the condition of it. And then, these practices over time develop more of a relationship where now I'm just like, I don't want to sit on the ants because they'll bite me. But I'm certainly not like, anymore.
Right. So I'm curious, as a psychotherapist, do you, for yourself, for your experiences, do you consider like the metaphor and symbolism of what you experienced? I'm just thinking, the gopher popping out of the soil next to you. Was there some metaphor of where you were in your life at that time that resonated with you at a...
Yeah. No, but I do know that is a doorway in. And so when someone does feel like there's a message to them, or a reflection of their process, I have had that in at some points in my life. That is a doorway in to building that relationship. Ultimately, it's about, again, decentering the human and centering the other than human. So I might be much more interested in what I'm giving the gopher. What does the gopher need in this moment? So in terms of metaphor, again, I think that that's a lovely way for people to connect with the other than human world. And there very well can be. you know, and it's always fun to do research on what is the symbolism of this animal or this direction or this water body, or, you know, I think that's a lovely way of interacting. I just always want to encourage people to see them as separate from us in a certain way, like standing in their own,
Yes.
yeah,
So
sovereignty.
well said. So well said, Julie, because we're so used to extracting from nature, right? It's almost a light extraction. Like,
Yeah.
what's the message for me here? However, we could do that and have that relationship as well. Ask, how may I help you? You know, what can I offer you?
Agreed.
Gratitude.
Agreed. Yeah. And so lovely. Yeah, that's a really good point, is that even if we do take it as this is a message for me, give something back, like you're saying, a thank you, or if you're curious enough, ask what can I give you? Learning to hear the answer, which sometimes is nothing. I'm good. There's nothing I need. Sometimes it's water. Sometimes it's touch me. Sometimes it's give me some hair, you know, like the hair is mineral rich, and, you know, but to your point, yeah, just a thank you is a great start.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
I really love this conversation, and I just want to open it up. Is there any other story that is wanting to be shared before we go?
Mhm. Can I give you a couple and you can decide if you
Sure.
want to use any of them?
Sure. I love it.
So these are coming from, I do a course based on the book,
Yeah.
Rerooting cohort. Yeah. And in the cohort, the way that I've created it is that each human has at least one other than human study buddy. So the cohort itself is human and more than human beings learning with each other. Okay. So these are two stories from Matt, from me as the facilitator. The most recent one is I had a jumping spider in my house. Yeah. And I was just like, wow, I haven't seen one of those in a long time. And it was pretty big. And so I watched it walk around the living room. I got close enough and, you know, could take a picture and then zoom in and see, oh, it's got like teal blue fangs. So, oh, I learned that's a male. Anyway, I'm watching it walking around and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what, you know, what am I supposed to do? I have a cat. Like, is the cat going to get it? Am I going to step on it? No, it's okay. It knows what it's doing. Like all of this stuff around it. And I thought, I'm just going to let it be, you know, and thought maybe I'll never see it again. The couple days later, I saw it again in my bathroom on the bath mat or the floor mat. And it was almost like barely perceptible because it's black with little white specks and the rug was similarly colored. So I was like, whoa, but there you are, you know, and I was again so charmed and falling in love with this creature and like, okay, you're welcome here and all that. Days later, I'm sweeping my floor and I see it again. Now I almost swept it and I was like, oh, so I'm like, what do I do? Like I can't just leave it because I was so afraid of what might happen to it. But I was so in love with the spider, you know? And so I decided to put it in, you know, like put a jar over it, put the thing, and I moved it to the windowsill. As soon as I did that, I saw it turn to the screen and look outside. And I thought, it can't get through the screen. I've just put it close to the plants, but it can't get out. I was like, what did I do? And so I went to get the jar again. And when I came back, it was gone. Gone, you know? And so I was like, oh no. And I'm looking and I'm realizing it might have gone into the track of the window. So now I'm like, now what? Because if I close the window or move the window, I am going to kill it. And I don't want to kill it. So I'm like, okay, I'll have to leave the window open until maybe I ever see this one again. But I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I put it outside? Why didn't I put it outside? 2 hours later, it's back on the windowsill. And I was like, oh my gosh, there you are. So I got the jar again, put it in, took it outside, let it go into the ground. And I realized, I'm telling the story because what I realized was this little bit of part of me that felt the privilege to own that spider, that loved it so much that I didn't immediately take it outside. I wanted, I'm not going to keep it as a pet, but I'm not going to take it outside. And it really taught me a lesson, again, a deeper lesson of this superiority. I wouldn't have thought of it that way until I went through this whole journey with it. And I realized that was the lesson that spider wanted me, or this is the lesson that I gained out of it, that I could then walk understanding another level of how I might dominate, out of love, and then realizing, no, I can coexist and let this spider go out into the world and I'll never see it again. And that's okay. And I thought to myself too, what a great gift that I know I'm not a murderer. I took it out. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's beautiful.
It was a really deep exchange and it took days. And I'm just kind of, in hindsight, shocked that how did I even see this spider more than once? And I don't know. It just, these are the things, right? Like, is that mystical? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but it happened. It was a relationship. I learned something about being a good family member.
Julie, that
Yeah.
is beautiful.
Yeah. There's another story about the water. I don't know if you want me to.
No, I want to hear water.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So the last cohort in fall, I chose water as my, my co-leader. And I found myself, I live in Los Angeles, so I'm quite near the Pacific Ocean, and there are other freshwater bodies of water here. So I found myself taking myself out to these natural locations to spend time with and learn my relationship with water. And then it dawned on me somehow, this attitude that I had about the water that was coming out of my faucet, how I somehow downgraded it. There's the ocean that I will commune with and the lake that I will commune with. But I realized, how am I thinking of the water coming out of my shower? Now, that water is still an ancient ancestor that's still with us. That water coming out of my shower head or my kitchen faucet is the water that was here before time. It's the water. There is no other water. All the water that we encounter is the water. That is such a trip to me. Archaeologically, it's like, oh, that's the water. So I started thinking about the water coming out of my faucets and realized how much better of a friend I can be to that water. And I thought, what can I give the water? And so I went and I got flowers and I put them at the bottom of the tub so that when the water comes down, before it has to go back into the drain, it's having a moment with me, but also with flowers and petals and leaves. And it was just a way of me saying, again, thank you. And I care about you. And what a great sacrifice you're making to now go back into this water reclamation plant and then go through pipes and come out for a second while I brush my teeth, So that was also a very kind of, is that mystical? I don't know. It's profound. It taught me a lot about my relationship with all the water and how to, again, just be a better friend.
Oh, I'm so glad you shared that. They're needing to be shared and needing to be heard. So Julie, as we wrap up, do you have any last words for people? I understand you have regular cohorts for the book study. I know you're in one right now. Is it possible for people, well, by the time this posts, you'll be done with it. So how often do you do them?
Yeah. So the cohorts are spring and fall. So there's 2 a year. There are other practices that are available in person, hybrid, online. Everything that I offer through my company Elemental is earth-centered. It's all designed to facilitate this reconnection in some way or another to ourselves, our own body as nature, and our relationship with the rest of nature. The cohorts, if someone does want to join, again, it's a cohort with other than humans as well, which I just can't love more.
That when I read about that, I was like, oh, this is just brilliant. It's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah. And so when they form, then it's closed. And for 6 weeks, we travel together in our cohort. And then we finish the cohort with a traditional forest therapy walk, for those of us that are
Local.
Yeah, local. So that's a way. And also, I want to say, just to anyone who's listening that wants to try it on, if they haven't already done something like this, to just, if you want to do today, wander out of doors and just notice if there's an other than human being that wants to play with you. And if you find that being, allow yourself to take 10, 15, 20 minutes to play and just experience what that's like.
I love that. What a great exercise. And yes, your book is full of beautiful invitations for people. So thank you so much for coming on here today, Julie. It's really been such a pleasure. I feel such kindred energy here for the Enchanted Earth.
Me too.
And for all of you watchers and listeners, if you liked this, please like, comment, and share. I will respond to your comments below. And I hope you have an enchanted day.
Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so that you'll know when we publish another inspiring episode. Check out my book, The Enchanted Earth, available wherever online books are sold. Thank you and have a magical day.